Have you ever felt that something in you is greater than the life you are living right now? What if the real key to changing your destiny is not out there in the world, but in the way you think, feel, eat, love, and speak each day? What would happen if you learned a simple art that could turn every ordinary moment into a step toward your higher self and a new life in a solar civilization? Hi, I'm Naiko, your host, and welcome to this new episode of Toward a Solar Civilization, sharing the teaching of Omraam Mikhaël Aïvanhov. Today, Michael will guide us into the art of living the new life. He will help us understand the great question at the heart of our evolution, the personality and the individuality, the lower nature that wants to take and the higher nature that longs to give and to love. You will hear how any true method has one simple goal: to reconnect us with our higher self, and how concentration, feeling, contemplation, and becoming can turn a single thought of joy into a lived state of consciousness. Michael will also share how a high ideal can act like an inner sun, how the famous formula of the disciple can reshape our heart, mind, soul, and spirit, and how something as simple as the way we eat, love, and speak and move can either imprison or set us free. If you have ever asked yourself how to live the teaching in daily life, this journey is for you. Over to you, Michael.
Hi, my name is Michael, and I would like to invite you on a journey with me, a journey through the teaching of Omraam Mikhaël Aïvanhov. Along the journey, we will come across knowledge which will help you live life in a more conscious way, and also make choices that honors you on your spiritual journey. You will be presented with knowledge, with ideas and methods that are simple but very powerful. Powerful enough to help you improve the quality of your life, but not only your life, but also the life of people around you, people with whom you come into contact. So yes, there is an answer to the problems of existence. And the answer is very simple and very powerful when put into practice. But before I go deeper into the teaching, I would like to explain a little about the title of the talk, The Art of Living the New Life. So, the art of living came because I was told a story from one of Omraam's journeys to the US. And there he was asked by a journalist, "What is it that you teach?" And he was quiet for a little while, and then he said, "I teach the art of living." Omraam was all his life very adamant about us being able to live the truth, live the teaching, live the spiritual science, because he said it's only by living it that we make it truly ours. The new life has to do with the fact that Omraam, through the teaching, was preparing us for the new life, the life in a solar civilization, a life of love and brother and sisterhood. So these two concepts or ideas is behind the title. Before I go deeper into the teaching as well, I would like just to have a few fundamental facts about spiritual practice clear. And it's important to remember that the methods we practice are not the goal, but they are means to reach a goal. And the goal is to be connected with our higher self, our core being. So when we practice a method, for instance, the moment we feel that we have established that connection, we stop the methods. We stop praying. We don't continue because we feel we have to say the prayer all the way to the end. No, the moment we feel that the methods we have is connecting us with something deeper, something higher, we stop, and then we are still with that connection. So there are 4 qualities or steps, you could say, when we practice these methods. And they're the same as when we meditate, for instance. So the basis of all practice is concentration. Without concentration, there can be no lasting and real results. So we concentrate, for instance, on a thought. It can be joy. And we hold that thought. Then the next step will happen if we're able to hold it for a while. Sometimes we have to hold it longer than others. But then a sensation, a feeling of joy will begin to arise. And then we contemplate that feeling. And it's more an area of being with whatever it is that we are focusing on. And if we are able to stay there long enough, we will enter the final stage, which is identification, or, as I usually say, becoming. And that is where there is no longer you and the thing that you are meditating on. So you become joy. You realize that joy is actually who you are. So those steps are important to remember when we do any kind of spiritual practice. I would like to read a quote before I go further. It's a quote from Omraam Mikhaël Aïvanhov, and it's a quote that actually talks about the key to solving the problems of humanity. I advise you to think about the personality and the individuality, because the question is absolutely essential. Many great thinkers have thrown a lot of light on all kinds of subjects, where I have devoted myself to shedding light and clarity on only one subject: the personality and the individuality, the lower animal nature and the higher nature, the instinctive nature, if you prefer, and the divine nature. That question has been my life's work, because I believe it to be essential. Yes, it is the key to solving the problems of humanity. If all human beings knew about the personality and the individuality, humanity would make astounding progress. So, the individuality and the personality, they are very different in the way they express themselves. They are very different in their 2 natures, but they have the same origin. And that is important to remember when we go on a spiritual journey, is that everything in life has its origin in spirit. Nothing is outside of spirit. It's beginning of everything and it's the end of everything. And that is a fact that is really important to bear in mind. Otherwise, we might get lost. Omraam used an image from nature to explain how they can have the same origin but be very different. And he used a snail as an image. And he used it sort of playfully, in the sense that he imagined he had a conversation with a snail, and that he asked the snail, why do you have this house? Why do you carry your house on your back all the time? And the snail said, it's because in this world, in the physical world, there are lots of dangers, lots of things that I need to be careful with because I'm so soft. And then Omraam asked, but how do you make that house of yours? And the snail said, I excrete a very subtle substance. And when it gets in contact with the air, it hardens. And that is how I built my house. So the same very subtle substance that helps build or form the personality is excreted by the spirit, or you could say it's a child of the spirit or our higher self. So the importance of the personality is very clear, because the spirit needs it in order to act, in order to do things in the physical world. So when we talk about our spiritual life and manifestation, the personality is essential, because the spirit is made of such a subtle substance that it can't really work on matter, physical matter around it. So it needs a vehicle, so to speak. So the two, as I said, are very different. The personality is very concerned about itself. It is very concerned about securing itself, as we saw with the house on the snail. It wants to protect itself, and it thinks it can do so by amassing things, gathering things around it. It can be people, it can be material things, but it wants to collect, it wants to have. Whereas the higher self, or the individuality, wants to give. It knows nothing else than to give, to share, and that is the two fundamental qualities of the personality and individuality. And this is actually the key in everyday life. When we look at people, we look at ourselves, we can see that sometimes we are motivated by the personality, and other times we are motivated by a higher impulse, an impulse to share, to help, and to enlighten others. So knowing about these two natures is essential, because that makes us able to discern and choose which way we go. We can also see it not only in our individual lives, but we can see it on the bigger scene with politicians, for instance, that sometimes, and most of the time, unfortunately at the moment, they are guided by the personality and not the individuality. And that again makes us able to distinguish what do we follow, what do we listen to. So a knowledge about these two natures is, as Omraam says, the key to the problems of humanity. So yeah, it can also be, how should I say, the personality can be a trickster, and it's a very clever one. It can even, in order to survive, in order not to surrender to the impulses of the higher self, it can take on a spiritual teaching, a spiritual practice. One of the ways we can see that is by, for instance, if we do breathing exercises, we do other exercises, and a little element of pride sneaks into us. A pride, look at how good I am, look at how long I can hold my breath, or look at what I do there, here and there, and so on and so forth. So it's something that sneaks in and tries to manifest no matter what we do. So again, it is really essential to be aware of those two natures. Yeah. So the aim of the teaching of Omraam Mikhaël Aïvanhov is basically to help establish a connection with our higher self. And that, you can say, is also what will solve the problems of existence. The personality, when it is influenced by the individuality, our higher self, it becomes obedient, submissive, and willing. And there is no doubt that there is no other no stronger, enduring helper than the personality. So our mental body, or our thinking, becomes subtle and are able to receive more light-filled thoughts, positive thoughts, our astral body or body of feeling will be able to express unselfish feelings, feelings of love, gratitude, joy. And the physical body, when it is inspired by the higher self, will be able to carry out tasks that we would otherwise see as miraculous. So, the root of the personality is in the astral body. It is in our desires. So the personality is moved by desires. And then it takes on the mental body, our thinking, in order to, how should I say, to achieve what it is that it desires, what it longs for. And then, of course, an action follows. But everything is to do with our basic desires. And then we try to rationalize them or think of ways in which we can get what we want. So that is basically how it works. It is important to understand then that it is our desires that dictates how we live. This can also explain why our project sometimes fails. Because when we have, like I say, an ideal, we think we want to do things in a certain way, but our desires tells us something different, and our action takes us in a third direction. So we are completely unfocused. And if we really want to be successful with what we do, and it can be a spiritual teaching, it can be ordinary things, we need to have a complete alignment between feeling, thinking, and action. And then, when that happens, we can work wonders. Yeah. So, the personality is defining itself through the five senses. It is seeing and experiencing the world through the five physical senses. And that, of course, means that it identifies with the physical body. The physical body is, as we know, limited. And I have a physical body. My neighbor has a physical body. So that creates a sense of separation. It creates a sense of you and I. And that sense of separation is the basis of fear. So the personality is motivated mostly by fear and wanting to secure itself from experiencing fear of loss, basically fear of loss. The individuality, on the other hand, is motivated by love, which is an expression of oneness. Love is a state of consciousness where we realize the oneness of all life. So they are very different in their origins and very different in their original natures. So what is the cure for fear, separation? There is only one cure, and that is love. Because it's only through realizing the oneness of all life that we can truly let go of fear. So love cannot be felt at the same time as we are afraid, and vice versa. So we have to welcome love into our lives, to welcome the higher self, and basically learn to live like the sun, to give unconditionally. No matter what people around us do, the sun is shining, the sun is sharing its light, its warmth, and that is how we should live our lives, because that is also the nature of our higher self. So how do we escape the grip of the personality? There are different ways. One of them is discernment. One of them is knowing what are the qualities of the lower self. And as I've said before, it is egotism, it is greed, it is desire of wanting for oneself at the expense of everyone around one. So that is basically the nature of the personality. So when we know that, we are able to stop when we make choices in our lives. Stop and think, where am I coming from? Is it the higher self or the lower self? Am I in this because I want to gain something from others? Or am I in this because I want to share of myself? Because I want to give, I want to share love and light. So we can choose then. And what is important to know is that whatever we choose, it will take us in two very, very different directions. One is the direction of the personality, which is the downward spiral, the road, you could say, towards spiritual death. The other is the upward spiral towards light, love, and God. And that is the road of the individuality. So depending on the choices we make in life, we will go in two very different directions. The other thing is that we can change our point of view. We can change our point of view from what Omraam called a geocentric, an earth point of view, to a heliocentric point of view, which is the point of view of the sun. When we look at our lives and the language we use to describe the way we experience life, we can see that lots of it is based on the geocentric point of view. One of the ways is that we say that the sun is rising in the morning and setting at night. Whether in reality it is the earth that is turning and the sun that is the center of everything. So when we know that we can try and identify with the sun, we can put us in that position and see how life looks from that point of view. Again, that makes us able to identify with our higher self. And one of the most perfect images of the higher self is the sun. So through identifying with the sun, the qualities, the virtues of the sun, we will little by little grow towards a deeper and deeper connection with who we really are, with our divine self. Also, when we meet other people, we can look at their divine self, not their personality. So in this way, it determines the qualities, the experience we have of the situation, but it also helps lift the other person out of their lower self into their higher self. If when we look at them, we don't see all their faults and vices, but we see their divine potential. That is a really powerful exercise. The last thing we can do, well, there are many things, but the last thing I want to mention is that we can work to develop and acquire a high ideal, a high purpose to guide us in our lives. And that is the next subject I would like to talk about. There is a quote I would like to read to you, a quote from Omraam Mikhaël Aïvanhov again. It's a quote on the importance of having a high ideal. The high ideal. Every ideal, whatever it may be, has a magical quality. It is linked to us and it transmits something of its very quintessence. If we have chosen a very high ideal, it will constantly supply us with beneficial particles and currents. Since we have shaped it and kept it in our mind and heart, it will always be there to improve conditions until one day we find that we have new conditions in our lives, which our ideal has prepared for us. But this will only happen if we love our ideal, if we think of it, nurture it, and despite its immensity and the distance that separates us from it, cradle it in our heart and soul. Yeah. So whenever Omraam, at least that's what he said in some of his many talks, he met someone, he would not ask them about what work they were doing or how much money they had or other things that we normally ask each other when we meet. But he would ask people, what is your ideal in life? And he said, when I hear people's ideals, I know exactly what awaits them, what future is in store for them. So being conscious of what is our goal in life, what is our purpose in life, is of the utmost importance, because it shapes and models our life and it influences everything we do. An ideal, as the quote said, is an active living being. It is a being that draws to itself elements from the invisible world. And what we need to understand is that in the invisible world, everything is linked, everything is related with each other according to the vibration. So you could say that there are families in the invisible world. So whatever thought or ideal we have, it is linked with other qualities and virtues that vibrates in harmony with it. So when we have or develop and choose a high ideal, not only the ideal, but all its friends, all its relatives will come along, symbolically speaking, and give us experiences, beautiful experiences, and it will help develop qualities in us, divine qualities. So to choose the ideal is really important. And an ideal should be high, the highest possible. Most people has as an ideal in life to have a car, a house. It's usually a materialistic concept of what is our ideal, how do we see our life as being successful. But Omraam was very clear about it, and he said, that is the means, it is not the goal. And we must choose then an ideal that is not of a material nature, but is of an ideal nature. So why should we choose an ideal that is so high, and as the quote says, that we probably won't be able to reach it? To explain why, he said that's the only thing in that way that we can be constantly happy and engaged. To give an example, he talked about a child, and I think we've all seen children kicking a ball, running after it, catching it again, and then when they caught it, they kicked it on again, and then they caught it. And it was during chasing the ball that they were happy, screaming, shouting. It is the same with our ideal. It is the journey towards the realization of that ideal that is important. It is the journey that will take us to places, fill us with love, enthusiasm, and joy. That is why if we pick a high ideal, and one of the highest ideals is to become like the sun, not as a physical ball of fire, but as a being that shares, loves unconditionally, that helps enlighten people with ideas and enthusiasm, and that acts to work towards the common good of everyone. That is the ideal of the sun. And that is what we must love and cherish and nurture. So from time to time, it is really important that we stop in our everyday living and we re-evaluate or get back to what is our ideal, what is motivating us right here, right now. And then often we will find that we will need to re-evaluate it and put the ideal that we have chosen, the spiritual ideal, in front of us again. Yeah, the high ideal is really important. But how can it help us on our spiritual journey? What is the spiritual practical significance of it? If we have developed a very strong connection, let's say with the sun, then one way of using that when we meet the challenges of life is to put that ideal right in the middle of our problem or challenge. And what will happen is, like when the sun shines in the morning sun shines, and there is a mist covering the ground, the earth. And then the warmth of the sun will slowly warm up the air and dissolve the mist. In exactly the same way, you can say that the high ideal, if we put it right into the middle of our problem, through its vibrations, will dissolve whatever it is that we find is a problem. And in that way, make us able to overcome the obstacles we meet in life. So that, of course, depends on how strong our connection with our ideal is, how much we have worked on it to establish a really, really strong connection with it. And that is done through our meditations, through our prayers, and through all the other spiritual exercises and methods that are given to us. However, the most simple way is to love. Because when we love someone, something, it connects us directly and immediately with that object of our love. And it's the same with the high ideal. It's the same that if we can truly find our love for it and cherish it as something extremely precious in our lives, then that will overcome everything. It will steer us, it will be a compass in our lives, because the ideal will set up a yardstick, so to speak, of what we meet in life. How does this, for instance, this situation, correspond with my ideal? Does it honor it, or does it go against it? And then again, discernment, we can choose what we want to do. So, put the ideal into the situation, and then the vibrations of it will slowly manifest and spread out and change the situation, transform whatever it is that we're in. So, the only truth which is worth seeking is the spiritual sun. And that is something we need to bear in mind, the spiritual sun. The physical sun, of course, is very important, but it's an image. It's you can say, an opening through which the spiritual qualities radiate out into the solar system. When we have that high ideal to become like the sun, we will suddenly realize that other things, other qualities begin to awaken in us. It is like when the sun shines in the spring on the ground, it warms up the earth, and then the seeds that lie dormant there, been lying all winter, they start to germinate, to grow. It's the same that happens inside each and every one of us when we have and hold and cherish that high ideal, is that it will awaken, it will warm, awaken, nurture those seeds that have been in us all along, that God has deposited in our very being. So having a high ideal will help us develop all the spiritual qualities that we each possess. Yeah, so have a high ideal is the essence. One of the things that Omraam gave us was a formula, and he called it the formula of the disciple. And the formula goes, to have a heart as pure as crystal, a mind as luminous as the sun, a soul as vast as the universe, and a spirit as powerful as God, and one with God. And it is to be said 3 times. And he said that that formula holds an entire teaching. I will not go into it so much now because that would be too much. But it is essential to know just a little about what it really means. Often, when I come across a new formula, it could be a prayer, but let's in this case take the high ideal. I wouldn't start immediately saying it very fast, but I would, again, as I said in the beginning, I would say very slowly, to have a heart as pure as crystal. And then I would focus on it, and I would hold it, and I would meditate on, yes, what does it really mean to have a heart that is pure as a crystal? And I would hold that thought, and I would contemplate it, and then eventually a feeling and understanding that is not intellectual, but comes from a deeper part of us, will emerge. It's the same with a mind as luminous as the sun. What does it really mean to have a luminous mind, a clear mind, a mind that radiates clarity, simplicity, purity? And to have a soul as vast as the universe. What does that mean? What is the vastness? How does that feel? And a spirit as powerful as God and one with God. What is that power that comes from God? And I'm not talking about human strength, physical strength. I'm talking a divine power that comes from the Spirit. So contemplate those things quietly. And then when you have that feeling, experience of it, you can speed up the tempo in which you say it. And in this way, you accelerate the energies. But if you do that before having a feeling of it, it will just be mental spin. And it will not really create any difference in you. Not much anyway. So the formula can be said any time of day. But it is also good to say it, let's say, after an intense spiritual work. Omraam, he said that when we have, for instance, prayed a lot or done a lot of meditation in silence, we develop or we generate energy that stores up inside us. And if we don't put it to use, make it circulate, it can actually cause damage within our nervous system, within our energetic system. So he advised that after to say formulas or a prayer after an intense spiritual work. So in order to make those energies work in a good way. He also said that the spoken word, because when we meditate, we're working on the level of thought, the mental plane, emotional plane. But in order to work and have an effect on the physical plane, we need to use the spoken word. So that is why it is very powerful to use that energy we have generated and to say the physical words in order to work on matter. Yeah. To have a heart as pure as crystal means that we must love God, we must honor God and ourselves and our neighbor with the purity of our unselfish love, a love that wants to serve rather than to gain, a love that is not thinking of itself and doesn't have any greed or any lower desires. A pure love that wants to share, that wants to lift up our neighbor and ourselves. To have a mind as luminous as the sun means to love God with the light of our intellect. To be very conscious of what our thoughts are. What kind of thoughts are we harboring? Are we thinking negative thoughts about ourselves and others, about situations in life? Or are we honoring ourselves and others and God through positive thinking, through thinking thoughts that will help lift up, enlighten others? To have a soul as vast as the universe can only happen through love. Because love is what opens our heart. Love is what makes us want to expand and to share. So love is the essential part to experience the vastness of our soul. To have a spirit as powerful as God and one with God is to love God with the power of our spirit. And the spirit becomes powerful when it is linked to God, when it is one with God. Because true power, as said before, comes through our connection with the divine source. So that's a few words on the power and the importance of having a high ideal. There's another thing I would like to share with you, another method of Omraam Mikhaël Aïvanhov, and that is what he called Surya Yoga. Hrani is a Bulgarian word that means something like nutrition. So the yoga of nutrition. A story that explained to me how difficult it actually is that after one of Omraam's journeys to India, he spent a year in India, and he came back to brothers and sisters in France, and they were singing during one of their meetings, and then they ate in silence afterwards. And then he said to them, "I can hear that your singing has improved while I have been gone, but you still don't know how to eat." And that showed me just how difficult it is. And it is something that I have verified in my own spiritual practice. Because eating is taking in nourishment and a lot of experiences in our lives, all the way back from when we lay in our mother's arms, being breastfed, or all the times that we have been sitting around a table eating with our family, maybe sometimes even talking about problems or other things. All these things can and probably will come up when we start to eat in silence, when we don't distract ourselves with television or other things while we're eating. And my experience is just to allow it to be. Don't focus on it, but just do the spiritual work that Omraam said that can be done during eating. A very important thing when we practice Surya Yoga, or the yoga of nutrition, is to create circumstances, a situation that honors what we are about to do. It can be eating in silence, eating in a beautiful place, and so on. And I am aware that for lots of people who live a busy life, who work and so on, this can be quite difficult. And then one thing that we can do is to listen to some music, some quiet music, some peaceful music while we're eating. That can help us also hold out all the distracting noises around us. So first of all, create a situation that honors what you're going to do. Then we eat in silence, and everything we do is with measured movements. So we try not to make too much noise with our knives and forks, with our plates, with our glasses, and so on. And that is not just because we want to create an atmosphere of silence and peace, but it's also, as Omraam said, when we do conscious measured movements, we are actually strengthening our will, the precision of our movements. So when we do that, we are working to strengthen our will. The way we nourish our feelings, our astral body, is through eating with love and appreciation of the food in front of us. So we can talk to the food. We can talk to it and say how thankful we are with, and we can look at it with love. And in that way, we will nourish our feelings, our body of feelings. In order to nourish our mental body, we can meditate on the food. We can think about it. Where does it come from? All the forces, the sun, the stars, from the cosmos, our Mother Earth, all the nature spirits, even the human beings who have been part of producing it, all these forces that go into the food and impregnate the food, we can meditate on that. And when we do that, we will experience that after a meal, instead of being heavy in our heads, we will actually leave the meal clearer in our thoughts, and clear-minded. So how do we nourish our soul and our spirit, our spiritual side? That is through eating with a sense of gratitude. Gratitude is the floodgate that opens everything that is divine to flood into our lives. So many times during our meal, we can stop and we can say thank you. Thank you for the food that I received. Thank you for the life that is given to me. So if we work in this way, we will create a situation where after a meal, we will feel much more alive, clearer in our heads, and full of a quiet gratitude. And we will be much more capable of continuing the work that is lying before us during the day. I've often asked myself, why is it so important to do this exercise with food? Why can working consciously through when we eat have a very, very deep and long-lasting effect on our day? Because Omraam says that if we eat in chaotic circumstances, it will affect the rest of our day. And I ask myself, why? Why is that? Why is it such a powerful moment to do spiritual work? And I realize that when we eat, we are naturally in a receptive state, which means that everything we think, all our feelings, will go in much more readily than when we do it, let's say, through prayer and meditation, because we are in a state of receptivity when we eat. The food that we eat, when it is in our mouth, we impregnate it with our thoughts and feelings. We change the vibrations of it. That food goes into our stomach. It becomes part of the building blocks that helps build and maintain our body. So on a very physical level, everything we think and feel will have a very, very deep and great impact and long-lasting impact. Yeah. Something about love. Love is probably one of the greatest mysteries of life. But a few things can be said here that you can use sort of like a guide. And in relationships, whether it's family, friends, colleagues, or partners, how we look at each other is of the utmost importance. If I look at my partner, for instance, as an object of through which I can satisfy my desires, as purely a man or a woman, then of course that allows me to think in a certain way about that person. If I see my partner as a soul, then there are certain thoughts and things that I can't do anymore, because that would not honor them. That would not honor their soul. And if I see them as a divine being, then again, it dictates how I can think and feel and act towards the people around me. And that also, you can say, opens up for a very different experience of what it means to love someone. Do we love them with an animal type of love, desire, sexual desire? Or do we love them from a spiritual perspective, where our greatest wish is to help lift them, is to help them improve and become a better human being? Those are two very different kinds of love. And it all depends on how we see each other. Love as the sun loves is one of the things Omraam would often say. Love unconditionally, without any interests of one's own. The sun loves you and I, the criminal, the saint, exactly the same. It doesn't shine selectively on people. It shines on all of life, no matter what they do, no matter how they behave. And this is how we should love, with a disinterested, impersonal love. Omraam said, always let the water flow. Water is the symbol of love. So no matter what we come across in our lives, because we will come across situations where we are hurt, where we feel misused, misjudged, and so on and so forth. But always let the water flow. Because the moment we shut the source off, the moment we close our heart, we will be the first one to suffer. We will be the first to experience that lack of love. So he was very clear when he said, always let the water flow, no matter what happens to you. And do it mainly for your own sake, but also because it will actually be the ingredient that will help resolve the situation you're in. Another thing I would like to mention is the power of words and gestures. A word has either creative or destructive power. And once we have said the word, once it is uttered, it is sent out, and we can no longer put it back. Take it back. It is there, circulating, and we don't know where it's going. It's out there in the invisible. So we have to be very careful and very conscious of how we talk about each other, and especially how we talk about ourselves or think about ourselves. Because when it's sent out, it can no longer be undone. So I'm sure you have heard about the sayings that you can sow the wind and you will reap the storm. So why is it that we sow a wind which is less than a storm and then we reap the storm? Why is it that if we send out a word, that it will come back to us in a much stronger way? And that is because, as we talked about with the high ideal, that the moment we send it out in the invisible, it will gather around it all its friends and say, hey, come along for the ride. And then it will come back. And when it comes back to us, it's not only on its own, but it has all its friends, all its family members are there, which is why we will either reap something that is truly beneficial and good, or we will reap something that is really destructive or negating towards ourselves and others. If we unconsciously, and sometimes we have to say things about situations or people that is not just positive. It is always good to say, to end, when we talk about a person or a situation, to end by saying something good. Mentioning a good quality about the person. Mentioning something good that can come from the situation. Because in that way, we will not stop what we have talked about, but we will send out something that can, how should I say, harmonize whatever it is that we have been talking about. So that is the power of words and why we need to be so careful what we say. Gestures are equally important. Gestures can be used to harmonize our inner state. If we are, for instance, if we are upset inside, naturally we will be motivated towards doing abrupt, hard gestures. But if we then consciously choose to do soft, smooth, harmonious gestures, that will have an effect on our inner state, and it will help calm us down. At the same time, we can use gestures to see what state people are in, what state we are in, by the way they move. So to be aware of our own gestures and those for people around us can tell us a lot about the situation and what to do. Yeah. Thank you very much for being with me. It's been quite a long journey, and I hope that some of what I have talked about can be of benefit to you on your journey through life. Remember that it is our focus in life that determines how we experience it. It is by analyzing and being aware of our thoughts and feelings and consciously choose what we want to think and feel that we are able to change the direction of our life and also how we experience it. Thank you very much. I feel privileged to have been able to share this with you.
Thank you, Michael, for this profound journey into the art of living the new life. Today, we have heard that real change begins in the invisible. It begins in the choices of our inner world. Each time we choose the individuality over the personality, we step into another life. Each time we align thought, feeling, and action with a high ideal, we do the very same thing. We have discovered how a single formula can become a living force in us. To have a heart as pure as crystal, a mind as luminous as the sun, a soul as vast as the universe, and a spirit as powerful as God and one with God. When we contemplate this and let it work in us, it transforms us. We have seen how even the simplest acts can change everything. Eating a meal, looking at someone with love, saying a word, making a gesture. All of these can feed fear and separation, or they can nourish love, clarity, and unity. When we eat with gratitude, when we see others as souls and divine beings, when we let our words and movements carry light, we are already practicing a new art of living. If this episode has touched you, choose one thing to begin with today. It might be saying the formula of the disciple with deeper attention. It might be eating one meal in silence and in gratitude, or simply pausing before you speak so that your words become creative rather than destructive. Every small step in this direction changes your path. It also changes the atmosphere around you. Little by little, the new life that Michael has described becomes a lived reality. In our next episode, we will continue to explore simple yet powerful ways to weave this wisdom into everyday life and to walk together toward a solar civilization. Stay safe, stay inwardly bright, and stay connected.